Not having played the game, I do not make the following statement with any delusion of authority. But Drakkhen is notorious for being the absolute worst RPG on the Super Nintendo. Granted, it was also the first RPG on the system, and was practically a launch title. But whether you think the game is a steaming pile of dog plop or not, it's hard to deny that Drakkhen is a pretty ugly port that's absolutely littered with design flaws. Level 1 adventurers can and almost certainly will run into end-level mobs. The menu system is an unintuitive mess, and these disembodied dog heads are as terrifying as they are hilarious. But as much as Drakkhen probably deserves a verbal beatdown, that's not really the purpose of this video. I just wanted to emphasize what an incredible experience Drakkhen 2 turned out to be by demonstrating how Infogrames took an awkward Amiga port, gutted it, and produced a near-perfect console-exclusive gem. Someone must have really loved the concept of a free-roaming 3D environment paired with a 2D adventure game, because that appears to be the only real point of commonality the two titles share, besides some story fluff about dragons. Realizing the original game was viewed as something of a turd by consumers, publisher Kemco limited the Drakkhen 2 moniker to the title screen and marketed the sequel by its subtitle, DragonView. Unfortunately, their subterfuge didn't improve sales. In 1994, DragonView's release was overshadowed by the likes of both Super Metroid and Final Fantasy VI, making it somewhat of a rare and expensive cartridge today. Sorry, hardware purists, but great SNES games don't come cheap. Plot-wise, DragonView is a little generic. Alex is the destined hero who sets off to rescue the girl he loves from the insane megalomaniac hell-bent on conquering the world with his army of netherworld demons. But I found DragonView's storybook presentation charming. Unlike other games, NPCs aren't given flat lines of dialogue. Instead, the game presents some small insight into their current mood and disposition. It's not what a character says, but rather how they say it. So while Alex and Katarina may be boring and predictable archetypes, the world Alex explores is populated with living personalities. Gameplay, however, is where DragonView truly shines. Even if its hodgepodge of dissimilar styles is a real oddity of the library, it's difficult to pigeonhole DragonView into a single genre. Technically, it's an action RPG. After all, you attack by swinging your sword around while racking up the experience points. But combat is pretty similar to that of a weapon-based beat-em-up, like Golden Axe. You have a full range of movement in the 2D environments. Alex, the hero, can move freely between the foreground and background and must do so to sidestep enemy attacks. He can also command elemental magic, hop around, throw bombs, shoot arrows, chug potions, and perform upswings on aerial opponents. All in all, the combat is a little hectic. Sometimes the spatial alignment can be tricky and you miss your mark even though your target appears to be standing right in front of you. But honestly, that was a pretty rare occurrence, and overall, the battle system is more fun than frustrating. If it weren't for the level system, which, judging by development screens, appears to have been a last-minute addition to the game, DragonView would be classified as a Zelda-style action-adventure instead of an RPG. But as implemented, level-ups give Alex a small incremental boost to his damage and defense, while true character advancement is achieved by hunting down sword and armor upgrades, as well as health and MP containers. In short, grinding helps. It just doesn't help a whole lot. In fact, when Alex is routinely getting his butt kicked at the start of his adventure, you're better off avoiding combat entirely until you can track down the first few item advancements. Unless you're feeling really confident about your ability to dodge enemy attacks, in which case, good luck! While DragonView starts off brutally difficult, it quickly becomes something of a cakewalk if you can track down all the health and stat upgrades. There are frequently points in Alex's adventure when you can temporarily overbuff your character by bravely venturing into later game regions and reaping their treasure. But between the tricky jump sequences and fierce enemies, the difficulty ramps back up for the endgame. And even when the enemies feel less than threatening, DragonView keeps the player engaged with the ongoing scavenger hunt for items, skill-based platform jumps, and tricky dungeon puzzles. But there's so much variety between dungeons that I was personally excited to see where the story would take me next. To clarify, the dungeons were not only visually distinctive, but each utilized a different set of rules for advancement. My favorite stage was the water temple that required Alex to swim through shallow canals and manipulate the environment with his freeze spell. But often figuring out how to proceed is a puzzle in and of itself. At first glance, DragonView appears to be an open world environment. It can feel a tiny bit like an Elder Scrolls on the SNES as you hunt for secret dungeons off the beaten path. But again, like Zelda, unlocking new regions is usually a matter of locating a special item that will remove an environmental roadblock. Speaking of world environments, visually, DragonView takes advantage of the Super Nintendo's Mode 7, a perspective trick that stretches two-dimensional images to simulate a three-dimensional environment. This first-person vantage point is used exclusively for overworld exploration, and although initially jarring, is not totally unattractive. This technique does have its share of minor drawbacks. The limited draw distance can make it difficult to stumble across landmarks. You'll occasionally bump into rocks and trees while trying to squeeze through an opening, and the game doesn't always give you a reference map. But on the plus side, Alex moves quickly, the game provides instant teleportation hubs, and the overworld enemies are easy to avoid. They mainly spawn on roads, and gliding at an angle almost guarantees that you'll never trigger an unwanted encounter. If you have the opportunity and means to try DragonView for yourself, I enthusiastically encourage that you do so. The adventure is never boring. Fans of Zelda types, beat-em-ups, or dungeon crawlers are all likely to find something about this game to love. Personally, I would rank DragonView among my top 10 of the Super Nintendo library, where it proudly sits among the hallowed classics such as Chrono Trigger, Lufia 2, and Super Mario RPG.